My name is Lauren Cassidy. I'm a digital marketing manager here at Sin7, and I'll be getting us started today. You are at the right webinar. This is the Inventory Nightmares Before Christmas and how to put them to rest. I'm going to talk you through who you will be hearing from today. You've got a great panel set up for you today, starting with Sin7's very own Josh Fisher. Josh is our VP of Product. He leads product strategy with a sharp focus on modern commerce, drawing on 20 plus years of experience building e-commerce tools, back office features, and supply chain solutions. And before Sin7, he headed retail commerce at Acumatica, delivering D2C and B2B integrations for top platforms and marketplaces. So thank you so much, Josh. You'll be leading the conversation today. We've got Austin Gardner-Smith, who is the CEO at DrivePoint. Austin is the co-founder also, and DrivePoint is a strategic finance platform built exclusively for omnichannel consumer brands like True Classic, Overnight Oats, Graza, Salt and Stone, Curology, Lalo, and many, many more. And then we've got Russell. Russell Cohn is the founder of Pale Blue Dot Partners, a fractional finance and operations consultancy for emerging CPG brands. Prior to launching Pale Blue Dot, Russell was founding partner at Free Reign, functional sparkling water, COO and CFO. Russell, I'm going to butcher this. Is it Mochidaki? You're muted, but I'm hopeful that
Mochi doki. Close.
oh, so close. That's a premium mochi ice cream and co-founder at Brooklyn Cura.
Kura.
So close. New York's finest sake brewery. So Russell, you can talk more about that and say it right so that I don't butcher it again.
Pale blue dots, easy to pronounce. Make it easy.
Yes, that one I crushed. I feel really confident in that. And then we've also got Greg Flint here today. Greg is the CEO of 413 Group, a leading digital commerce agency specializing in e-commerce solutions, integrations, and marketing. He's got over 20 years of enterprise technical leadership experience. Greg has grown 413 Group into a global team recognized for delivering scalable, high-impact strategies that help businesses succeed in today's online marketplace. So thank you all so much for hopping on and for letting me butcher your bios. Really appreciate it. Real quick, high level agenda today. We're going to talk about how to identify red flags in your current systems before we get too close to the holiday, which is quickly approaching. We're going to talk about why you need multiple demand forecasts and how you should model them. Ways that Sin7 can help automate, forecast, and fund your holiday prep. And then we'll talk simple tactical steps that you can take as soon as possible to avoid any big catastrophe coming to Q4. We are going to talk about why Q4 prep matters now. As a lot of you know, holiday demand is hitting earlier when we talk about Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So much is coming so quickly, so it's better to be prepared now than too late. Your margins are getting tighter, your customer expectations are rising, and your planning delays are going to cost you big. So today is a very important conversation. We encourage you to ask as many questions as you might have. This is an expert panel and are really capable of answering your questions and giving you the best advice possible. At the bottom of your screen, you should see your Q&A function. Please feel free to submit any questions you might have. If for some reason we do not answer your questions today, we will follow up with you following this webinar. Please don't hesitate. We will make sure we get to every question either live or following. Real quick, before we get to the panel Q&A, I'm going to launch a couple polls for everybody. So real quick, if you wouldn't mind, I will start with our first poll. You should see it on your screen now. Go ahead and tell us, what's your biggest concern heading into Q4? Is it stockouts and inventory issues, fulfillment delays or other bottlenecks, financial planning or cash flow issues, returns and customer satisfaction, or hitting your sales targets? Give you one more minute to answer that. Still got a couple coming in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. All right, it looks like the bulk of you are looking at stockouts and inventory issues as a big concern going into Q4, which we completely understand. But all of you have run the gamut of all of these concerns, and lucky for you, we will try and address all of them. We'll go ahead and go into current forecasting. How do you currently forecast demand for the holidays? Do you use historical data and spreadsheets? Do you rely on a forecasting tool or a specific platform? You have a great gut instinct that you follow, which is brave. Do you not forecast? You just kind of react right now, and then you're not really sure. Maybe you're new to this, and all of these answers are okay. Just let us know. Again, we'll give you one more minute. All right, go ahead and end that one. It looks like the bulk of you are using historical data and spreadsheets, while the rest of you are relying on a forecasting tool or platform, which is great. Really happy to see that none of you are just going on gut. That's great news. That's already putting you ahead of the curve. We'll go ahead and go into your marketing plan. How finalized is your Q4 marketing plan? It's fully finalized and funded. It's you have your strategy set, but your creative is still kind of in the works. Maybe you're just getting started, or you don't really know. Maybe it's not handled by you, it's handled by a whole other team. All right. All right. So there's a lot in the works, or maybe in the works, and we're figuring it out. That's great. And then
So great to see this data.
I'm glad we're doing it. It really does set the stage for everybody.
Right.
Last one is, where are you in your Q4 inventory planning? Is it locked and loaded and you are ready? Have you started, but you still have a ways to go? Maybe you're behind, but you're trying to catch up. You haven't started yet. Or what's Q4 send help? Which again, no wrong answer, no judgment here, safe
Hmm.
space. Got a lot of answers for this one. That's great. All right. It looks like a few of you are ready to go, feeling really confident. But overall, it looks like things have started, but there's still a lot to go. And that's great in terms of making sure that we're as beneficial to you today as possible. And we can give you some real tips of the trade for that. So having said all that, Josh is going to be your MC for today and really monitoring this conversation. So Josh, I will hand this over to you.
Great. Thank you. And thanks everyone for contributing to the polls. It actually is really helpful to kind of get a lay of the land as we get started. So let's just dive right into it. I figure we can just kick off with the meat of this topic right out of the gate. Excuse me. Let's just go around the circle. And if you guys can give me just tell me your number one tip. So we have an audience of people that are all prepping for Q4. Um, every single business has challenges and they have concerns or they have questions. So you guys have years of experience. What's the number one thing that you would recommend that these businesses think about? And like, what do they have to get right in order to be successful this Q4? So let's start with you, Greg.
Uh, so I think there are two sides of the same coin. One is please start now, and the other is you have plenty of time. So the please start now gives you an indication that maybe you need to hurry, but you have more time than you think. And when I look at it, it's those of you who are I didn't see if anybody answered the what's Q4 send help, but if you were in that category, okay, maybe you are a little late. But for most everyone else, you have time. It's the wheels won't come off, whether it's inventory planning, whether it's locking down your marketing plans and budget and creative. There is time, but you really should start moving now. So I think that's typically when people call us and say, "Oh my gosh, what should I do?" We're often looking for, where are the gaps? What are
Hmm.
the pain points? What are the where's the friction in the process, whether it be creative or fulfillment or whatever. So
Okay.
that's what we
So
look for.
so start thinking about the holidays tomorrow. Like get those
Yes.
meetings scheduled. How about you, Russ?
Pretend like it's snowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just flurries. It's just flurries right
Flurries.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a little.
Getting ready. Yeah, Josh, my number one tip is really around communication. I think this extends really well from what Greg is saying. Like, yes, you can start now, but like more than anything else, it's bringing the right people into the room. And that's not just internally. Yes, you have to talk to your marketing team, talk to your sales team, talk to your finance team, your ops team. Everybody needs to be coordinating and talking from the same page, but it's also communicating with your partners outside. And we've
Hmm.
seen so many problems that are mitigated by having clear communication with your warehouse, with your co-manufacturer or your suppliers, whoever they are, to make sure that they know what to expect from you. Here's when we're going to start discounting. And so when you're going to see an uptick in sales, here's a new product we're launching or a new packaging. Here's a new process we're implementing. Here's a change from what we did last year, and just trying to be very transparent with your partners and treating them like partners, not adversaries or counterparts, is really key to executing smoothly as a team around the holidays.
That's great advice. It's almost like thinking about all of these external vendors, suppliers, and so on as extensions of your own team. It's like you would not make big changes without telling your own team, these people are essentially your team. They're just not on your payroll, you know? How about you, Austin? What's your number one tip?
Yeah, I'll cheat a little bit. I'll piggyback off of Russell's for one quick one, which is just making sure that the within your team and your org, the right side knows what the left side is doing. I think some of the worst situations, and we sit between finance and ops and planning really frequently, are sort of like, okay, when ops makes a plan that there's not enough cash to fulfill, or when sales makes a plan that there's not enough inventory to fulfill. And you would think that that's fairly trivial, but I think starting to communicate and share plans early, just internally, to make sure that the both plans are speaking the same language is really key. So get the two sides talking together. And then a very tactical one for me is like, I think oftentimes we talk about like, what's the plan for Q4? What's the plan for Q4? It's important to embrace the unknown a little bit and say like, well, there's a plan for Q4, but really there is a range of outcomes, right? There is some amount of unknown that no one knows going in, no matter how good you are.
Yeah.
And so it's about understanding the error bars on what is good and what is really bad, and then helping to figure out, be prepared for all of those scenarios. Because I think, that we don't, no plan will be 100% right. And so making sure that we understand the range of outcomes versus a specific plan, I think is really important.
That's really great advice. That's great. Okay, so now let's dig in a little bit deeper. So, Greg, I know you work with a lot of businesses on the technology that they're using to actually sell to the customers and the technology they're using to operate their business. So, thinking about the timeline, it's July now. What would you kind of mark as a drop dead deadline, and then maybe it would be a good idea to have it done by this time if there's open projects that are in process?
Yeah. It depends on when things start getting heavy. We do have some clients that they're selling to people who are using their products for holiday. So people who are selling to small crafters and things like that. So their Q4 starts right at Q4, like October 1, they are feeling it. So
Hmm.
it's kind of it depends. If you're a typical, you're gonna feel it in end of November into December. We're definitely tuning back the changes in their environment in October with a absolutely can't go forward with more on really November 1st. But
Hmm.
there's always those things. So there's never a hard and fast. Some clients are like, I think we're going to be done October 1st. Okay, that's cool. We have no problem letting everything settle in and getting a solid month and a half of
Yeah.
runway. So it depends.
Okay. But definitely October 1st sounds early, but I would say you basically give yourself 3 weeks from whenever that time of like it's going to get critical. Yeah,
Yep.
the 3 week gap is good, and then that gives you a little
Yep.
flexible. Back to what Austin was saying, you have a range there.
Yes.
It might be 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Yep.
can I add in on that? It kind of,
Sure.
I think it also depends on what kinds of tools you're thinking about. Because like there are some tools that will interact with your accountants and they're not really fully integrated until you've gone through a month-end close, as an
Mm,
example. And some tool that's integrating with your accounting systems where it's going to only be visible whether it's been done, implemented fully and properly once you've done a close. That timeline, that clock really starts once you've completed the integration, and you've only completed it once you've gone through one of those full cycles. So, 3 weeks for a new tool might be plenty of time if it's just focused on inventory planning going forward. But if you're talking about something that's going to sync between, your different accounting applications to help support the accounting close, you might need more lead time. Not to jump on what
That's
Greg was
great.
saying.
no, agreed. And just to add in, so when you miss the October 30 date and it slips to November 3rd, and then your first month end close with that new thing that's impacting accounting is right smack dab in the middle of Q4, that's when I think everybody collectively starts sweating. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely it's a good one, Russell, to keep in mind.
Okay, so Russell, you've worked with a lot of these businesses around their inventory plan. What's a lot of brands are going through the holiday season. Maybe not, obviously a lot of brands are going through it for the first time, but a lot of the brands that are listening to us, it could be they could have been through this many times before, but they're all growing and becoming more mature. What are some of the challenges that you see them face when it comes to inventory planning? Like, what is the one thing that you see over and over again, and how do you mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. This is one area where it can actually be harder as a young business, even
Hmm.
if your overall business is simpler than a more mature, complex business, but you have less data to try to refer back to and say, what happened last year, the year before that. This year's holiday season is not going to be the same as last year's. And you need to take into account what has changed on the ground in that time frame. So I think the first thing that is to list out what is going to be the impact on our sales versus last year. We launched a new product. We're in some new retailers. We have a new promo that we're launching. Any of those are going to impact your sales, and you want to literally like list them out and say, okay, this is going to increase our sales 10%, this is going to decrease it 10%, this is going to be a push, whatever it is, to try to narrow what isn't known. And there are always going to be things that are unknown, but I think Austin highlighted it earlier, scenario planning. What's one scenario versus another, to make sure that you understand what your risk factors are, and where your blind spots potentially are.
That's great. Okay, so then Austin, I'm curious from your perspective, when we're thinking about forecasting, what are the data points that are the most important for businesses to focus on, and what do people typically miss that you recommend and it has a positive impact for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first and maybe most important, and I'm sort of a finance guy, so I'll think about it through the lens of your company financials. But on the balance sheet, really understanding two things at this point and then up as close to the start of Q4 as you can would be your cash position and your inventory position. So what do you expect to have as starting inventory before you place these new orders and and what's your total cash availability, right? And so thinking about those two things as like this is my dry powder. Basically, I can turn that inventory into more cash and I can turn that cash into more inventory, but what's my baseline starting point? And that might seem like a simple question, but now is the time to go request a super accurate stock count or make sure that you have everything imported into the system and start that process now so that when you're looking at September 1st, you're entering that planning phase or finalization of that planning phase without ambiguity on your starting point. I think that's a huge thing that may seem simple, but often you start scrambling and you sort of still have questions around like, well, how much of XYZ SKU do we have and where is it and what DCs is it at and all that kind of stuff, right? So trying to answer those questions and really do the work to get a very, very good handle on inventory and cash position going into the season is super critical. And then I think when you think about what's actually going to happen in that Q4 timeframe, there's a couple of things that are super important. One is the product mix, right? So both what has the mix been historically, and what do we expect the new mix to be? So oftentimes, Russell, as you mentioned, you might have had new SKUs or new products that don't have any history, right? So that might take some more time to think through, okay, what is the range of outcomes of product mix? If I take this, is it cannibalizing another SKU from next year? Is that actually net new incremental unit volume that I need to think about? And so being really dialed in on what you expect the product mix to be, I think is a key input both to what POs you need to place, what your cash position will be, and ultimately what your margin profile will look like in Q4. And then the last piece that I'll say, and there's tons of other things, but for anybody who has an e-commerce business or a direct consumer component of their business, one of the biggest missed pieces or things that changes frequently in Q4 are sales from repeat or returning customers. And so getting a really good handle on that and understanding like, hey, this is an opportunity for us really to reactivate customers who may have purchased before, who may be lapsed, or otherwise take advantage of the customer base that we've built. I think that's a really key thing to think through, that it won't be business as usual, right? You have an opportunity to reaccelerate some of those guys. And so you may have that returning customer piece where, maybe you're forecasting that as saying, hey, 30% of our business always is going to be returning customers. Well, in November and December, it's likely to be a much higher percentage of those returning customers. And there's a couple of different strategies you can take to think about that, but those would be a couple of big ones. So it's inventory and cash position going in, right? Knowing where the starting line is, the sales mix, especially across SKUs, and then returning customer behavior would be my sort of top 3 data points.
It's really interesting. Well, honestly, we could spend a whole hour just talking about this one topic because it's like such a balance of art and science, right? There's no perfect way to do it. You get better at it through experience. Everybody's had their stories that teach them for next year and so on. It is interesting for me to think about. I have a net new product, and I'm trying to determine how much inventory I need for the holiday season so that I obviously don't overstock the product, but I wanted to do as well as possible and not stock out. And like
Yeah.
figuring out what that magic number is I think that's it'd be a really interesting thing to deep dive on. Okay, so let's I want to talk about operations too. So Russell, I know you're an operations guy. You've worked with a lot of businesses on helping them become more efficient in the back office. One of the areas that we know bottleneck businesses is in the shipping and fulfillment. And I'm curious, like what packaging recommendations or shipping strategies can you recommend that will help our listeners operate more efficiently?
Yeah, the biggest tactic that you can use here is simplify. It really it all depends on your business model. Every business has different considerations, different customer expectations, etc. But anything you can do to simplify your pack out will make it easier for your 3PL to keep up with volumes that are elevated in Q4 and will make it easier for your customer to get the right product packaged in the right way every single time. So for some companies, that may mean kitting out ahead of time. If you know that you're going to be shipping lots of the special holiday bundle, great. You can start kitting that special holiday bundle today. And you can do it well ahead of when the Q4 rush is going to hit your 3PL. Anything that involves putting in custom, gift notes, custom marketing inserts, packages of where the customer gets to choose which bundles are going together in what way, that's going to make it harder for your 3PL, and you want to try to avoid that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's interesting because brands love that post-purchase experience, right? Everybody loves opening a box and finding a handwritten letter inside. But like in the holiday season, like, you know, you're either going to have one of those CNC writing machines where it writes with an ink pen, or or you're probably not going to have a good season. Um, okay, so Austin, back to finance. How do you take your cash flow and balance it out and align it with your inventory plan? So like you were saying earlier, you have your dry powder. Like what kinds of decisions are you making to determine, or what kinds of tools maybe are you using to determine how to balance those two out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a couple of different things in the mix when you think about the balance of inventory and cash. And I do think it's worth doing the exercise from a sort of blank slate standpoint to start, which is almost to say, okay, let's put the cash balance aside for a second and think about the scenarios in terms of sales, inventory position, and purchasing, right? And do an upside and a downside case and figure out where that lands you. Now,
Hmm.
there's a very related question to that, which is, do I have the cash to execute on that plan today or not? And then be able to cut back on those two things. The other piece that I think is really critical is like you have enough line of sight, by the end of July here to start thinking about where you want to land the year from both a cash position and an inventory position. And I think there could be a real temptation to try um, to really accelerate or kind of go big or play a little bit of catch up in Q4 on a top line perspective that might put you in a tough cash position at the end of the year, right? So I think those are the two things to sort of think about is like, where am I really comfortable ending the year in terms of both cash and inventory?
Yeah.
And make sure you have that bound and then kind of trim back. So the tools that we would be using typically are a three-statement financial model that's sort of a monthly cadence just to really understand, okay, what do we think that sales plan is going to be? And that usually will have a slightly looser variation of cash. But then from there, getting to a pretty detailed PO plan. And typically there's a more direct cash flow forecast model in there as well, where you might be running, we're probably getting close to, I don't know, about 20 weeks between now and the end of the year. So, a 13-week cash flow model is sort of the standard, but kind of having a weekly cash flow model. And it doesn't have to be super granular through Q4, but as you make those plans, just starting to lay in those POs and those receipts as well. Knowing in the case of some retailers that some of the POs that you put out on this side of the calendar year, you might not actually get paid on until the other side of the calendar year. And does that put you in a really precarious position at the end of the year in terms of cash, especially if sell-through doesn't hit as you think it might? So I think the cash timing, and then I recommend all of our customers like you need a sleep at night cash balance at the end of the year. That's sort of your like can't go below. And if that means that you underkick a little bit on Q4 versus what you think the upside might be, that's better than the week after Christmas sitting there wondering how you're going to make payroll. So yeah, I hope that's fairly
That's
tactical,
such a
but
great point. That's such a great point because even this webinar, we're like so focused on Q4. It's like the Super Bowl, right? Everybody's like fighting to get up to the Super Bowl, but it's not like we win the Super Bowl and we're going to take Q1 off, right? There's still, you're exactly right with payroll. You're still going to have to pay people. There's still going to be operations that are running. And if
right,
you put yourself in a bad, you could have had an incredible Q4, but it doesn't mean you'll be in an ideal situation the first week of January. If you're
right.
not thinking about that, that's you're gonna have some
Yeah, and I think I often ask people to think about Q5 as sort of like there is this weird period of
huh.
like we rush through Q4 and everything seems to get front loaded. Those last sort of 3 weeks of December and then the first couple weeks of January are often super quiet, right? So I think it's really important as well to think about ways that you can either A, spur that, like I think in apparel, soft goods, hard goods, there's a huge opportunity actually to sell into that window. The
Mhm.
acquisition markets dip, the promotional activity goes down across the board. And so there is actually an opportunity to really push hard there. Or if you're more of a food and beverage brand or there's something like that, like we often see spending patterns shift in Q1 as consumers pull back as well. And so it's important to think about that. Like if you end up with a ton of inventory at the end of Q4, right, that's not just going to slow you down a month. That could actually slow you down a month or 2 months going into the following year.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, so Greg, we're talking about a lot of hands-on work and thinking. How how does all of these businesses are going to have some methodology and tools to manage them through Q4. What are some of the signs that they need to be looking out for that can tell them maybe it's time that we find a better methodology or a better tool?
Yeah, or as I mentioned earlier, where you're feeling friction, where something's not quite as smooth. Austin kind of tongue in cheek mentioned, maybe you start loading the data into that system now, because it some of those systems, they don't have the integrations to the rest of your infrastructure. So I think it's look for the places of friction, look for those requests that you make them and they feel like they take longer, because the volume on everything gets turned up in Q4. And what is maybe a little annoying right now or a little noisy becomes deafening once everything is happening. So I would look for those things. And then it's always the quadrant of what's the value or the positive impact that this can make versus the effort involved, and look for the low effort, high impact. And there's probably some high impact that are also extremely high effort, and those might have to wait till after Q4.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So all the annoyances that you're having right now, expect them to scale. And if you
Yes.
can remove those annoyances now, you'll probably benefit from it later. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're talking about this, I'm curious, you know a lot about integrations, integrating systems in many different ways. How how have you seen integrations um, benefit these businesses as they go into these busy seasons, right? So integrations, I hear feedback from merchants all the time about integrations constantly. So I'm just curious, like, what's the upside if somebody heads in that direction, what benefit can they expect?
Yeah. I think there are two benefits. One is you there are those things, and we've all had those experiences where you make a change and you say, oh my gosh, why did I wait so long to do that? That was way more annoying than I realized. But now that I don't have it there, I, there's so much, you know, space to operate, or, whatever it happens to be. So from my standpoint, it's there's just so much operational efficiency and so much noise that you can take out of the system by just a simple integration. And whether it's let's say you sell on Amazon and Shopify, and you don't have a system to integrate inventory, so you're trying to figure out, wait, did I oversell? I'm not, I don't know where things are. It's small things like that. And we have clients who are like, no, 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 I have a spreadsheet. And I'm like, uh-huh. And you have a spreadsheet until the one person who knows how to, you know work all the knobs on the spreadsheet, is sick, or has to host Thanksgiving and can't do all the knob turning. And then that's when you're like, well, we should have integrated that, we should have built some automations there. So I
Yeah.
think it's looking at those things, and sometimes it's looking behind the process at, are there people that are making this happen, or is it technology that's making it happen?
Yeah. Okay, that's great advice. For me personally, I can't even imagine running a business without the systems integrated with each other. Like I know there's plenty of businesses that do it.
Yes.
They'll download a CSV from one system and then upload it
Yep.
to another system. Or
Yep.
God forbid somebody has to take documents from one person and manually key them into a system. Like
Uh-huh.
we built that IDR feature last year that you can basically take a picture of, let's say, a purchase order, and then
Yep.
you upload it, and AI just reads the document and it pushes it right into the system. And like, imagine that solves a problem for a human that literally types up 30 to 50 purchase orders a day. And
Hmm.
that person has capability beyond just typing. Like, there's so many things
Right.
that person could be doing. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Integrations is the same way. And whenever, there's a new technology called MCP. It's something that's happening in the AI environment. And it's basically allowing you, just like today, you can prompt in ChatGPT and it'll spit back some kind of response. MCP technology is allowing you to prompt instructions that go to all of your systems. So you can say,
Mm,
Shopify,
yeah.
all my descriptions with better SEO content, or whatever. Like the API integrations, they run in parallel with MCP. And
Yeah.
if you don't have the integrations today, the MCP is going to be meaningless to you tomorrow. So
Yeah.
like, prepare for what's coming. So anyway, I'll get off the soapbox now.
No, I love it. And you're nailing it. It's yeah.
It's one of the,
MCPs are going to be huge.
yeah, yep, totally agree. Okay.
Really
So
quick, Josh, in preparation of this webinar, we had chatted a few times, the five of us, and something Greg had said, and that's like what I'm hearing right now and is resonating with me is like doing your inventory, doing the holidays shouldn't be that hard.
Hmm.
It's scary and intimidating, but like all of you have kind of called out that like if you're prepared, it shouldn't be that hard, and that's kind of what I'm hearing. So I just wanted to call it that maybe that's a key takeaway today, that like if you're prepared now, shouldn't be that hard later. Not to say that it wouldn't be difficult, but you can do
Right.
things to prevent some of those difficulties.
And look at the things that make you kind of go, uh, that like that emoji, the yeah, that guy. If you have that feeling, then that's an area that you should look at and see, can I automate? Can I integrate? Is there work that we can do to streamline it?
mhm.
One thing on that note that we see often on inventory specifically is, the system can say one thing, but what's actually in the warehouse might be something different. And so the challenge where I get that emoji is really where I'm relying on the counts that are in the warehouse management system for my 3PL, but I know that those are way off. And so the value of having the right integrations, et cetera, with Shopify, with Amazon, is that, and this is part of why we implement Sin 7 for a lot of our clients, is that I effectively have a calculated inventory. As long as I have confidence in the starting number on, let's say, October 1st, and I know what I've shipped to all of
Yep.
my wholesale partners, all of my Shopify customers, my Amazon customers, I don't have to rely on the WMS at that point. I know what should, emphasis on should, be in the warehouse at that point. And this goes back to, managing the things you can. It's a little bit of the serenity prayer that we say throughout Q4. We can only change certain things. How well our warehouse keeps track of their inventory isn't one of them, but we can make sure that we have a count of what we think should be in inventory.
Okay, so Russell, you started the conversation talking about the importance of communication, right? And like, when it comes to things like lead times and supplier communications, and preparing buffer stock and safety stock for, especially if you're a multi-channel seller, there's a lot of challenges, technical challenges that nobody can solve right now. Like the fact that Amazon doesn't take new inventory levels for at least 30 minutes at a time, stuff like that. Like, you don't have any control over it. So what recommendations do you have to get the whole team aligned? Do you have one central system? Do you have, like, what do you do? A daily email? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, we definitely try to have a central system, and we try to have the right people have access to that system, which is key because the ops team might have this great S&OP model that says here's what we're going to produce, but if they're not making that available to the marketing team or the sales team in a useful way, if they're not giving access to the Sin 7 outputs so that they can see what's in inventory, then it's less useful. So getting the right people in the system is first. I think the second thing is, and it goes back to something Austin said earlier around inventory, or sorry, scenario planning, is that plan for what happens in the scenarios where things are messed up. So for example, hey, we run short on inventory of our newest SKU because we're getting a bunch of demand and we know we have line of sight, we're going to run out. Which customers are you shorting? Do you decide I need to prioritize my D2C customers because they're loyal, they're subscribers, or do you say, hey, I'm selling to UNFI for fulfillment to Whole Foods and I can't afford to sacrifice that relationship? That might be something where the team isn't aligned up front. Much better to figure it out now, or at least have a plan in place now. So when things get heated in the fog of war in the fourth quarter, you're not starting that conversation from scratch. And you may change your mind, you may readjust based on new information, but at least you have a prior plan.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think in Ben Horowitz's books, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, I just remember this section where he talked about like, there were no good options. Every option, every path we were going to take was going to be painful, but the best you could do is make sure you picked the least painful one, right? And then make sure everybody's on the same page that we're going to take this pain and deal with it.
Yeah.
It's that's thoughtful. So
One thing I'd love to add there, if I can, Josh, is like the around communication and collaboration and these things. Like I think having a central system is crucial, and having these tools working together is awesome. But there's one incredibly low tech thing that everyone could do today, which is write down your list of, like, get out a calendar and write down your planning checklist in your calendar and know what your stage gates are, right? So write down like, hey, on October 1, we're going to have final stock counts and all those little black hole corners of our inventory system that we know exist. We're going to greenlight the work to manually track those down between now and October 1st. Okay, by November 1st, Russell, we have our priority accounts list, and we know we're going right down these channels and these accounts. And if somebody gets shorted, this is the stack rank, right? And so that's the thing that I think is having those dates, and you can literally this afternoon block those meetings on your team's calendar for the rest of Q4 and know where your stage gates are on these items. And I think that'll back out a whole set of activities if you go do that work now. So anyways, that the calendar is still in some ways maybe the most high tech or the most effective tool in our very high tech AI driven world.
right. It's like taking it back to the analog. That's uh,
Yeah.
such a great point, though. Like basically laying out that path. That's what you're doing. And these are the milestones that we're going to hit, and these are the actions that we're going to take. And this is the information we're going to collect, and this is
Yeah.
what it's going to tell us down the road.
And that's knowable today, right? Like to your point, Russell, like the calendar is knowable. And if like, on November 15th, 3 days before Thanksgiving, we're going to have all of these things done, right? It might slip, as all things tend to do, but it gives you, in terms of like generalized anxiety reduction of founders and operators, I think having that calendar in place can go a really long way.
So,
Well,
okay.
really quick, sorry, Josh. It occurred to me that data and information is the antidote to anxiety and emotional decision making in Q4. The more data, the more things you pre-decide, the more things you document, the more data you have, the more information you create for everyone, the less, I mean, it is the antidote to the knee jerk, we're sending this inventory to wherever, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, that wasn't the plan. So
Mm,
I think that is the antidote. And I think it's easier than people believe
that's a
to,
great quote. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Lauren, you should write that down. That should be like the subheading of the whenever we post this. That's great. So, okay, so Austin, I think this is the last question, then we'll jump into Q&A. But I want to talk to you about modeling because it surprises me. There's a lot of businesses that I talk with where maybe they know what modeling is, but it's a new concept for them, or they don't understand really how to like use it to their advantage. And earlier in the conversation, you talked about figuring out where the guardrails are, and then basically just keep keep the boat between those guardrails, right? I feel like modeling can help you figure out what those guardrails are. So can you give us some advice on modeling and what to think about?
Sure. I mean, there's sort of a famous quote about modeling that all models are wrong, but some are useful, right? And so I think the real value in having a model, there's often this sort of very first order level of thinking, which is like, okay, well, a model's job is to approximate reality as closely as humanly possible, right? And I think that that's true to some extent. You want a model that says if X happens, Y will be the output, and usually that's something as simple as if we sell this much, our inventory balance will be here, our cash balance will be here, our profitability will be here, right? And so something that has those very simple input and output dynamics is useful. You can really chase the accuracy concern as one piece of this and really try and dial it in. I actually think the better use of models as an operator is, to your point, like helping you understand the edges of the distribution of what's possible, right? To say like, okay, well, what would be the best possible case we could imagine? Let's run that case out and be able to understand, okay, that's the very best things could be. Okay, what's our disaster scenario? Like, what is the worst possible thing that happens? We launch this new SKU in Q4 and it doesn't sell, right? Or we know it's going to be close with one of our suppliers and we don't get that supply until December 3rd, right? Like, think about those two things. And then you have your error bars of kind of the distributions. And I think that also just doing those two things can relieve a huge amount of anxiety and kind of knowing, okay, so that's my range, right? And now I'm kind of operating within that range. And the real value is to say, okay, well, what are the leading indicators in each of those scenarios where that cause decision points for me? And so you might find like, oh, it is actually that supplier timing, right? The delivery date of that key supplier timing, that is the number one date that I need to be focused on because that's the gap between a 20% case and a 60% case. Or on the upside, like, hey, here's the unit volume at which I run out of inventory way faster than I want to, right? And sort of like being able to triangulate on that stuff. So I think it's finding those couple of key, I call them guardrails typically. Like, what are your guardrail KPIs? And again, and that goes back to the overall simplification of this stuff, right? Like, if you find yourself in that position and you're trying to triangulate 17 different variables and reforecast at that point, it's not that you won't do a bad job, but you're going to be emotional about it at that point, right? And so pre-setting walking in, what are those KPI guardrails that I'm looking at and know that like, okay, if X number goes to Y threshold, I'm going to stop spending on marketing, right? Like, hey, if volumes and velocity move really fast early in the season, I'm actually going to cut back on promo because I don't need to give as much away. I need to maximize the dollar volume of my existing inventory on shelf, right? And so just those are small examples, but I think that's the real value of modeling is really understanding the range of outcomes that are possible and then finding those trigger thresholds for the business that can simplify your life as an operator.
I think honestly that is so about 10 years ago I started to pay close attention to the characteristics and personalities of the most successful business leaders that I've met and then the ones that were doing good and the ones that failed. The thing that stood out about all of the leading business leaders, the ones that really had success and drove forward and been in business for a long time, they all thought in numbers. They spoke in numbers. Like, you would have a conversation. They're the kinds of people that understand like how taxes are calculated in different states around, their location, right? And I noticed that trend, and then I realized that like modeling is how they come up with their plans. And it's exactly as you said. Basically, if you have a strong model and you drill deeper and figure out, um, you start to realize that the entire business is broken up into all these categories that can be measured. And if you pay attention to where each of those levers are, then you know how to control the business to get it to the outcome that you want. And that, I mean, especially in our world, we have a lot of super creative people that don't think in numbers. That's not natural for them. And if they can make that transition and maintain their creativity and learn to think in that manner, and then they're just a powerhouse. I mean, those are the leaders that are unstoppable.
Yeah, I think there's
So
this sort of like generalized feeling. And I was an English major in college, right? So I'm not like a super numbers driven person, but I call myself a recovering English major. But like, uh, you know, simplifying it down to ideally, there's fear around the complexity of these models, and you open a giant spreadsheet with 27 tabs and all these other things. But really, the value of it is finding those one or two or three critical numbers or OKRs or whatever you want to call it that really move the needle, and that can simplify everything. Like I was just doing second half planning for our business. And it basically sort of, I was running all kinds of scenarios and came back to like, there's really only two numbers that matter in this entire business right now. Like everything else is kind of a guess and it's a useful guess, but there's only two things that matter, right? And so all of that complex modeling ideally leads you to a very simple conclusion that makes it easy to run the business by looking at one or two numbers on a day-to-day basis. And you have to periodically reforecast and remodel, but the goal, that fear should be like followed by clarity, right? After a long period of playing with the numbers.
One of my mentors earlier in my career used to tell me the only thing you know about a financial model is that it's wrong. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing, but understanding those sensitivities, understanding, if I pull this lever, here's what's going to happen. And I think to Austin's point, understanding in this scenario, if this happens, I will do X, and having that agreed upon ahead of time is so valuable.
yeah. What a great conversation. Okay, so I think we have about 8 minutes left. Lauren, I'll
Yeah.
pass it back to you.
Thank you, Josh. And thank you guys. This was a great conversation and I think super valuable. If there are any last minute questions that weren't answered today, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A, or we're going to be sending follow-up resources after this. You can respond to that email. You will be responding to me. I will make sure that you get your question answered wherever it needs to get answered. So I will just pop that there. I think the best way to end this, given the amount of time we have left, and we've talked about this a little bit, what is the best for each of you? And Josh, I'm going to ask you this question too. What do you think leaving today is the first thing or one of the best things that someone can do to prepare themselves for the upcoming peak season, like this week? What's something tangible that they can do and should think about doing immediately? No pressure.
I'm happy to give my cheat code that I think everybody knows, but everybody forgets, which is there are humans that are involved in all of this. Some of them are on your payroll, some of them are not. And so if you sent, burritos to your 3PLs, maybe you get a little preferential treatment. Maybe people, they handle your stuff a little more gently. It's hard to tell, but a very small $100 investment to feed a warehouse team at your 3PL, it's shocking how far those things can go. And so I think it's just, in the spirit of Q4, caring for all the people that are involved in all of this stuff and going the extra mile to do it oftentimes makes a big difference in your business. So that was one we all chuckled about earlier that
Love
we
that.
forget about.
You have to make sure that the burritos are wrapped in red and green wraps, just to really
Just to really hit it home. Yeah, no
yeah,
red and green wraps. It doesn't
right.
work. You're
I love,
correct.
Greg, that you said the spirit of Q4. I'm going to start saying Merry Q4 when I run into people. It's
To those
There
who
you
celebrate.
go.
Yeah.
to those who celebrate, to those who suffer. Lauren, this actually goes directly off of what Greg was saying in terms of these are humans. I'll go back to what I said first. Get the right, what I would do tomorrow is get the right people in the room. Get your marketing team, your sales team, your ops team, your finance team in a room and say, hey, let's talk about what's going on for Q4. What's everyone already working on? Where do they see holes? Those are smart people with great experience who have insight. And even if you don't have those people on your full-time payroll, it's your marketing agency, your sales agency, your contractors, et cetera, and then do the same thing with your external partners and sit down with them, figure out who the right people are to be in the room for those calls, have that conversation and see what comes up.
Mine, I'm just going to go back to the calendar. I think that if you did one tactical thing, this week, it's write down the calendar and of your sort of planning checkpoints, we will have X done by Y. And I think you'll and then set those meetings. Make sure that they're just put them on the calendar now. There's no reason that you can't have all of your planning and forecasting checkpoints and meetings between here and the end of the year put on the calendar by the end of the week.
I think for me, if I were a business leader and we were going into Q4, it goes back to what somebody said earlier about trying to find those. I think it was Greg that said this, like trying to find those points of friction that are going to scale up. So actually, I think what I would do is I would go to the different departments, but not go to the department leaders. I would go to the people that work for the department leaders and just ask, friendly conversation, but just like what is slowing you guys down today? Like what is creating a challenge for you today? What are some processes that annoy you? And like at least know about them, because they're going to scale later on down the road. And if you have a few more months to try to fix those problems, you could actually make the season a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great answer too, Josh. I think it speaks to like understanding the full experience of everyone who is contributing to your Q4 and
Right.
trying to make a seamless process. So that's great. Mark, I do see your question come in. I will reach out to you following this, just given timing, but please know it's seen and we will follow up with you. Austin, Russell, Greg, Josh, all of you, thank you so much for taking some time to talk us through what is kind of a big topic and an intimidating time of year. So thank you so much for that and for giving some good advice, specifically the burritos, but everything else, really quality advice too. Again, everyone, thank you for attending. We will send you this recording and